I've spent most of this week fluctuating between bouts of extreme anger and abject sorrow. As clergy, I have believed it my responsibility to live and teach the love of God while resisting the almost demonic allure of partisanship in secular matters. But now our society seems to have reached an intellectual impasse where everything, every thought, every action, every belief, every intent is political. I've policed myself so as to avoid any expression, spoken or otherwise, that may give anyone offense, especially with those who may be seeking a pastoral relationship with me, or who have one. I no longer put political signs on my front lawn during election season. So this week I found myself trying to figure out once more how to tell people about the love and forbearance of our merciful and all-powerful God while my country was in flames. Riots in major cities, protests in all 50 states, federal law enforcement routing peaceful protesters with pepper spray and rubber bullets, military vehicles on the streets of the nation's capital, church structures damaged by rioters and appropriated by ambitious demagogues, and all coming on the heels of the slow murder of an unarmed black man under the knee of one sworn to protect and serve. So, how can I talk about love this week? How can I convince anyone that the capacity to give and receive love is really all we have in the long run? What is going to make anyone listen to one more mewling preacher praying for de-escalation? Well, the devil haunts a frustrated preacher. The devil soothes his guilt and assures him that the unwillingness of people to respond to God is not his fault. The devil strives to convince the preacher that since no one is listening, he should just stop wasting his time. And I can tell you from experience that those are soothing words. Those are welcome words. And those are words that I would like to believe. But the truth is not that simple. Especially for those of us who live in white, rural America. Essentially, we live in Mayberry. 94% of us are white. 91% of us graduated high school. 1 in 3 of us has at least one college degree. Violent crime is 1/3 of the national average. And pre-pandemic employment rates, hovering at around 5%. We live in what my friend Mary calls a snow globe of society. We, for the most part, are not directly exposed to the trauma and tragedy of what goes on daily in the more populated areas of our country. And because of that, we depend upon interpretation of all of those events through the filter of partisan agents of the political process that supports the way in which we tend to lean. Ever since presidential advisor Kellyanne Conway introduced the concept of alternative facts at the outset of the current administration, news agencies and press offices have exercised unabashed application of bias, sound bites, and propaganda to befuddle and sway the minds of American citizens and the world. We have become convinced that people who do not share our beliefs and ideals are ignorant, dangerous, and undeserving of a hearing. But this is not hard to believe when we admit that skin color has long fostered those same feelings. I know. I grew up in the South in the 60s and 70s. It was part of the culture. And while I'm embarrassed to talk about it, I cannot deny it. But my degrees in anthropology were good for me. They enabled me to step outside of myself and to see my culture as an outsider sees it. My education allowed me to see that larger forces were at work, using language and seemingly innocuous policies to dominate and subjugate a portion of the society for reasons I couldn't or wouldn't understand. But it felt evil to me. And from the time I was able to develop my own sense of personal honor, I've striven to overcome the racist feelings of my childhood. I believe I've accomplished what I set out to do. But I'm coming to realize that it is not simply enough to not be a racist. In order for racism to end, we must become anti-racist. It's easy for us to be not racist in our rural bubble, where 9.5 people out of 10 are white. To make a difference, we're going to have to make an effort to step outside of our comfort zone. We must find ways to constructively apply the outrage we ought to have when race becomes a handle for subjugation. Write letters. Support appropriate legislation. Donate money to campaigns or causes that work for universal justice. You know what? Run for office. Really, run for office. Join a protest. Organize a protest. Make your voice heard. You know the old saying, all it takes for evil to flourish is for good people to stand by and do nothing. Now, I suspect I'll get some negative feedback from encouraging people to act out. But I make this encouragement in hopes that our better angels will prevail in the fight for the soul of America. We who proclaim ourselves Christian should recognize the difference between what we do and what Christ would have us do. We ought to know if our motives don't pass the smell test. Patriotism, security, status quo, my country, right or wrong, these might be fine if not hackneyed ideals, but they're not Christian. Jesus told us to love one another as I have loved you. He said you should love one another. And God knows that loving each other is hard to do, but we are the only beings in creation that can choose to do so. And unless we try, we'll never prevail. In my prayer book that I use for daily morning prayer for many years, there's an icon written by an acquaintance of mine from years ago, Christine Hales. I keep it near and look at it when I need centering. This is that image. It wasn't until one of my young acolytes here at Zion Church asked me about it that I realized the image is of a black or brown-skinned man. Was Jesus black, he asked me. Well, I smiled and replied, he was a brown-skinned Middle Eastern Jew. Did you not know that? Well, no, the acolyte replied. I guess I never thought about it. How many God-fearing American Christians have never thought about the fact that Jesus did not have blonde hair and blue eyes? Have you ever thought about that? Jesus was a man of color, and he was brutally murdered by militant peacekeepers for crimes he didn't commit. Will nothing ever change? Go in peace to love and serve the Lord.